Alexandra Morgan settled into position on the dusty ridge overlooking the training zone, her cheek resting against the precision machine chassis of her Barrett M82A1. The Nevada sun beat down mercilessly, but she remained perfectly still, her breathing measured and controlled as it had been for the past 2 hours. Through her scope, she could see the target placement team moving the last steel silhouette into position, 3,247 meters away, nearly 2 miles downrange. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The desert air shimmered with heat, distorting her view through the scope as she made minute adjustments to her calculations. Wind speed, 8 miles per hour from the west. Temperature, 94 degrees. Humidity, 13%. Elevation, 412 feet above target. Barometric pressure, 29.82 inHg. Each factor would affect her bullet's trajectory over such an extreme distance. Behind her, Commander James Blackwood shifted his weight, the small movement sending a cascade of pebbles down the ridge. Alexandra didn't flinch. She'd learned long ago that reaction was a luxury she couldn't afford. The commander's skepticism was palpable. It radiated from him like heat from the rocks around them. He hadn't wanted to be here, watching what he clearly considered a publicity stunt. "Target set," came the radio confirmation. "Whenever you're ready, Morgan." Alexandra made a final adjustment to her scope. "Acknowledged," she replied, her voice quiet but steady. Her finger rested lightly against the trigger guard as she ran through her mental checklist one last time. Commander Blackwood leaned closer, his voice low and graveled from years of shouting orders over gunfire and ocean waves. "You know the current confirmed record is 3,540 meters, set by a Canadian JTF-2 sniper in Iraq. Your little exhibition here isn't going to impress anyone." Alexandra didn't respond. Her focus remained downrange, where the distant target, barely visible to the naked eye, awaited her attention. The Barrett felt like an extension of her body, a familiar weight earned through thousands of hours of training. She'd been preparing for this moment since she was 17, taking her first shots with her grandfather's hunting rifle in the mountains of Montana. "I've seen a lot of shooters come and go," Blackwood continued, his tone making it clear what he thought of female snipers in his program. "Most of them couldn't hit consistently at half this distance." Alexandra inhaled slowly, filling her lungs to 3/4 capacity. Her heartbeat slowed as she had trained it to, her muscles relaxing into that perfect state of controlled tension. As she began her exhale, her finger moved to the trigger. The Barrett roared, the massive .50 caliber round tearing through the air at over 2,800 feet per second. Alexandra rode the recoil, her body absorbing the massive force as she maintained her sight picture. 9 seconds later, an eternity in a sniper's world, she saw the distant target rock backward with the impact. "Hit," came the confirmation over the radio, a note of surprise evident in the spotter's voice. Without a word, Alexandra cycled the bolt, chambering another round. Before Commander Blackwood could speak, she fired again. And again. And again. 5 shots in total, each finding its mark with unerring precision despite the nearly impossible distance. The radio crackled. 5 for 5. All center mass. Alexandra finally looked up from her scope, meeting Commander Blackwood's stunned expression with calm eyes. "The exhibition wasn't for the record, sir. It was to demonstrate consistency. Anyone can get lucky once." Blackwood's weathered face betrayed a mixture of disbelief and reluctant admiration. "Who exactly are you, Morgan? And how the hell did you end up in my training program?" Alexandra began breaking down her rifle with practiced efficiency. "Just a Marine who transferred to the Navy, sir. Like it says in my file." But they both knew there was more to the story. Much more. Alexandra Morgan hadn't planned on becoming one of the world's deadliest snipers. Growing up in rural Montana, she'd been the quiet middle child in a family of 5, more interested in books than the hunting trips her father and brothers lived for. But that changed when she was 17 and her oldest brother returned from Afghanistan with a Purple Heart and nightmares that wouldn't let him sleep. "They never saw us coming," he told her one night, when the pain medication had loosened his tongue. "Our sniper team kept us alive out there." When you can hit what they can't even see, you become something more than human to them. You become their guardian angel. Something about those words had resonated with Alexandra. The idea of protecting others from a distance, of being the unseen shield between danger and those you care about, it spoke to her in a way nothing else had. Her father had been surprised but pleased when she asked to join him and her brothers on their next hunting trip. Even more surprised when she showed a natural talent for marksmanship that surpassed even her military-trained siblings. By the time she graduated high school, Alexandra could outshoot anyone in 3 counties. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The Marine Corps' recruiter had been skeptical when the slender, serious-eyed young woman told him she wanted to be a scout sniper. "That's not a path available to women in the Corps," he'd explained, not unkindly. "But there are other ways you can serve." Alexandra had nodded politely and enlisted anyway, determined to find her path once inside. She excelled in basic training, setting marksmanship records that still stood at Parris Island. Her drill instructors had been impressed enough to pull strings, getting her assigned to security forces where she could at least receive advanced weapons training. For 5 years, Alexandra had served with distinction, volunteering for every marksmanship course available, accumulating certifications and awards while patiently waiting for the policy changes she knew must eventually come. When they finally did, when combat roles were officially open to women, she had been ready. The Marine Scout Sniper School had never seen a female applicant before. The instructors, many with combat experience in Iraq and Afghanistan, had viewed her with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. Some had been openly hostile, certain she would wash out in the first week. "You think you can handle this?" the lead instructor had asked on day 1, his eyes sweeping over her with the practiced disdain of a man who'd seen too many cocky recruits fail. "This isn't marksmanship badges and range qualifications. This is about endurance, pain tolerance, and mental toughness that most men don't possess." Alexandra had stood at attention, her eyes fixed forward. "Yes, Sergeant. I can handle it." The 12-week course had been deliberately designed to break people, physically, mentally, and emotionally. The attrition rate typically hovered around 60%, with many candidates failing the initial physical screening test. Alexandra had prepared for months, pushing her body beyond its limits to ensure she wouldn't be the first to fall. "Look at that," one of the male candidates had sneered on their first endurance march, a 20-mile trek through rough terrain with 80-pound packs. "Morgan's already struggling. Told you females can't hack it." Alexandra had been near the back of the formation, her shorter legs working double time to keep pace. Her muscles screamed in protest, sweat soaking through her uniform despite the cool morning air. But her face remained impassive, her breathing controlled. When the same candidate collapsed from heat exhaustion 10 miles later, Alexandra had helped drag him to the medical vehicle, never breaking stride. The physical challenges had been expected. What Alexandra hadn't anticipated was the isolation. The barracks had been modified to give her a separate sleeping area, a gesture toward privacy that only emphasized her outsider status. Conversations would stop when she entered a room. Training partners would be assigned rather than chosen. Mealtimes meant eating alone, acutely aware of the stares and whispers from tables around her. "They're not going to accept you," her roommate from her previous unit had warned during a rare phone call. The sniper community is the most tightly knit, traditional branch in the Corps, They'll never see you as one of them." "They don't need to see me as one of them," Alexandra had replied. "They just need to see that I can do the job." And gradually they did. Her scores in the marksmanship phases were consistently at the top of the class. Her stalking skills, the art of moving undetected through terrain, proved exceptional. Where others relied on brute strength, Alexandra used technique and precision. Where others became frustrated with the punishing regimen, she displayed unshakable patience. By the 6th week, the open hostility had largely given way to grudging acceptance. By the 10th week, she had earned the respect of most of her classmates through the universal currency of competence. And when graduation day arrived, Alexandra Morgan stood among the 40% who had endured, the first woman to complete Marine Scout Sniper School. But graduation had only been the beginning. The real challenge came with her first deployment to Afghanistan, where she joined a unit that had never worked with a female sniper before. "This isn't about your qualifications," her new commanding officer had explained bluntly. "It's about the dynamics in the field. Having a woman on the team changes things, creates distractions we can't afford." Alexandra had listened patiently, then replied with the same calm confidence that had become her trademark. "With respect, sir, I understand your concerns. Judge me by my performance. If I become a liability rather than an asset, I'll request to transfer myself." Her first mission had come 3 days later, a surveillance operation in a mountain valley known to be used by insurgent forces. Alexandra and her spotter, a sergeant named Rodriguez who'd made his skepticism abundantly clear, had been inserted 5 miles from the target area, moving only at night to avoid detection. For 72 hours, they'd lain in a carefully constructed hide, taking turns observing the valley through their scopes, documenting movement patterns and personnel. The temperature dropped below freezing at night. During the day, the sun baked them in their camouflaged position. Neither complained. On the 3rd day, they'd spotted their primary target, a local commander responsible for coordinating attacks against coalition forces. He appeared briefly, surrounded by bodyguards, to inspect a weapons cache being moved through the area. "Range to target, 1,340 meters, Rodriguez had whispered, calculating through his spotting scope. "Wind variable, 5 to 8 miles per hour, left to right. Temperature 84 degrees. Humidity 15%. Barometric pressure 24.8. Alexandra had made her own calculations, adjusting her scope minutely. Confirmed. Permission to engage? The radio had crackled. "Sierra Actual, this is Overlord. You are cleared to engage primary target. Repeat, cleared to engage." Alexandra had exhaled slowly, centered her crosshairs on the target's chest, and squeezed the trigger. The shot had broken the valley's silence like a thunderclap. Through her scope, she'd watched the commander drop instantly, a clean kill at a distance that would have challenged even veteran snipers. "Holy shit," Rodriguez had breathed, his professional demeanor slipping for a moment. "That's a confirmed kill. 1 shot, 1 kill at over 1,300 meters. The extraction had been tense, a careful nighttime movement through territory now on high alert. But when they'd finally returned to base, Rodriguez had done something unexpected. In the briefing room, surrounded by the rest of the team, he'd announced, "Morgan made a shot I'm not sure I could have made. Textbook perfect. We're lucky to have her." That single mission had changed everything. Word had spread quickly through the tight-knit sniper community. The female Marine wasn't just qualified, she was exceptional. Over the next 11 months, Alexandra had accumulated 26 confirmed kills, many at distances that pushed the limits of her weapons capabilities. More importantly, she'd prevented countless casualties among the units she supported, becoming the guardian angel her brother had once described. When her tour ended, she'd returned home with a Silver Star, a reputation that preceded her, and a new goal in mind. The most elite snipers in the military weren't in the Marine Corps, They were in the Navy's SEAL teams and their specialized counter-terrorism unit. And as of 2016, those teams were technically open to female candidates. "You're out of your mind," her former commanding officer had told her when she mentioned her plan. No woman has ever completed SEAL training. It's not about marksmanship, it's designed to be physically impossible for most female physiology. Most female physiology, Alexandra had corrected quietly. Not all. The Navy SEAL training pipeline began with a 24-week Basic Underwater Demolition SEAL (BUD-S) course infamous for its brutality. The third week, known as Hell Week, required candidates to endure 5.5 days of constant physical activity with a total of only 4 hours of sleep. Many classes saw 80% of candidates ring the brass bell that signified their decision to quit. Alexandra Morgan became the first woman to attempt BUD-S in January 2017. By the end of the first day, 3 candidates had already quit. By the end of the first week, that number had grown to 12. Alexandra remained, her face a mask of determined focus despite the punishing regimen. Morgan, the lead instructor, had bellowed during their first beach run, a seemingly endless journey through soft sand while carrying inflatable boats over their heads. "You falling behind already? I've got a nice warm blanket and hot chocolate waiting for you by the bell." Alexandra had said nothing, conserving her energy for the task at hand. She'd prepared for this moment with a training program specifically designed to compensate for the natural strength disadvantages she faced compared to her male counterparts. Where they relied on raw power, she emphasized efficiency and technique. Hell Week had arrived like a nightmare, cold, wet, and seemingly endless. The instructors had pushed the candidates beyond normal human endurance, forcing them to operate on minimal sleep while constantly wet, cold, and physically exhausted. The infamous surf torture, lying in the frigid Pacific Ocean until the body approached hypothermia, had been particularly brutal for Alexandra's smaller frame, which lost heat faster than her male counterparts. "You're turning blue, Morgan," an instructor had observed during one especially long evolution in the surf. "Ready to quit yet?" Alexandra's teeth had been chattering uncontrollably, her limbs numbed by the cold. "No, instructor," she'd managed to stammer. "What was that? I couldn't hear you over the sound of your weakness." "Nitrogen monoxide, instructor," she'd shouted with the last of her energy. When one of her classmates had begun showing signs of dangerous hypothermia during another evolution, Alexandra had positioned herself next to him in their boat crew, using her body to shield him from the wind during brief respites. The act hadn't gone unnoticed by the instructors or her fellow candidates. By the end of Hell Week, only 11 of the original 40 candidates remained. Alexandra Morgan was among them, having earned something more valuable than simple survival: the respect of men who had started as skeptics and finished as teammates. The remaining weeks of BUD-S had tested different skills: underwater competence, demolition techniques, land warfare, but none had matched the sheer brutality of Hell Week. Alexandra had excelled particularly in the sniper modules, her previous experience giving her an edge that even the instructors acknowledged. Morgan's natural on long-distance shots, one instructor had commented during a qualification exercise. "Some people have the gift. She's one of them." When BUD-S graduation arrived, Alexandra stood with just 8 others from her original class, the first woman to complete the most physically demanding military training in the world. But becoming a SEAL required more than just surviving BUD-S. Graduates still needed to complete SEAL Qualification Training, SQT, a 26-week course that built on the foundation of BUD-S, with specialized skills including advanced weapons training. It was during SQT that Alexandra had truly found her place. The advanced sniper modules revealed her exceptional talent to a wider audience of instructors and operators. Her ability to remain motionless for hours, her intuitive understanding of ballistics, her seemingly supernatural capacity to account for environmental factors, all marked her as something special even among the elite. "You're a witch with that rifle, Morgan," her chief instructor had said after she outshot everyone on the advanced sniper course. "Never seen anything like it." Upon completion of SQT, most graduates were assigned to regular SEAL teams. But Alexandra's unique skills had caught the attention of a different unit, Naval Special Warfare Development Group, the Tier 1 Counterterrorism Unit known informally as SEAL. Team 6. She had been offered a chance to try out for their specialized sniper cell, a group whose existence was rarely acknowledged even within the special operations community. The selection process had been even more secretive than Buddies conducted at remote facilities with candidates who never learned each other's full names. Alexandra had found herself competing against men with years of combat experience in Iraq and Afghanistan, many already decorated for valor under fire. "Think you're special because you made it through Bud S?" one evaluator had asked her during an interview phase. "That just got you to the starting line. Here, we need operators who can make impossible decisions under impossible conditions. Your gender won't matter downrange, but it doesn't earn you any special consideration here either." "I've never asked for special consideration," Alexandra had replied evenly. "Just equal opportunity to be judged on my performance." For 3 weeks, the candidates had been pushed through high-stress scenarios testing not just their tactical skills, but their decision-making under pressure. Sleep deprivation, sensory overload, and psychological stress had been constant companions. Throughout it all, Alexandra had maintained the same composed demeanor that had become her hallmark: steady, methodical, and lethal when necessary. The final test had been a simulated hostage rescue requiring precision shooting in a complex urban environment. Candidates had to eliminate multiple threats without endangering non-combatants, all while working with a team they'd never trained with before. Alexandra's shooting had been flawless: 5 targets, neutralized with headshots from positions that most snipers would have considered impossible. That performance had earned her a place in the most elite sniper unit in the U.S. military, and a reputation that followed her even among men accustomed to extraordinary achievements. For 2 years, she had operated in shadows so deep that even her family believed she was working as a standard Navy instructor. Her missions remained classified, her achievements unrecorded in any public record. And then had come the transfer to the Naval Special Warfare Advanced Training Command, where Commander James Blackwood had first encountered her extraordinary capabilities on that dusty Nevada ridge. Now, as they walked back toward the command center after her demonstration, Blackwood's initial skepticism had transformed into intense curiosity. "You've been operating with Team 6, he said quietly, making it a statement rather than a question. Alexandra neither confirmed nor denied, maintaining operational security even with a fellow officer. "My service record is available for your review, Commander." "Your service record is heavily redacted," Blackwood replied with a hint of frustration. "What I want to know is why someone with your obvious capabilities is now assigned to my training command instead of being deployed, where those skills could be put to use." Alexandra continued walking, her expression revealing nothing. "Perhaps the Navy believes I can be more valuable teaching others than operating myself." Blackwood stopped, forcing her to either stop as well or appear insubordinate. "Cut the bullshit, Morgan. I've been in this business for 20 years. Nobody transfers an operator of your caliber to a training role without a reason." For a moment, Alexandra remained silent, weighing how much to reveal. Finally, she met his gaze directly. "There was an operation. Northern Syria. Things didn't go as planned." The commander's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "Casualties?" Alexandra looked away, her eyes focusing on the distant horizon. "No, not because of my shooting, anyway. I made the shot I was sent to make, 2,780 meters, through a third-floor window in a populated area. 1 shot, 1 kill. Then what's the problem?" Her voice remained steady, but something flickered behind her eyes. The intelligence was flawed. The target wasn't who we thought he was. I eliminated a high-level Russian military advisor who was supposed to be meeting with ISIS leadership, but who turned out to be there on a sanctioned diplomatic mission we hadn't been briefed about. Blackwood inhaled sharply. Jesus Christ. It nearly caused an international incident. Would have if the Russians could have proven U.S. involvement. The mission was disavowed. The team extracted safely, but someone had to take the fall. So they benched their best shooter, Blackwood concluded, anger evident in his voice. Made you the scapegoat for an intelligence failure. Alexandra shook her head slightly. I volunteered for this assignment, Commander. Every trigger pull has consequences. I accept responsibility for mine. They resumed walking, a new understanding forming between them. After several minutes of silence, Blackwood spoke again, his tone different, now respectful rather than challenging. We have a new sniper program starting next month. Advanced techniques for extreme long-distance engagements. The instructors are all combat veterans, former team guys with solid experience. But none of them can shoot like what I just saw. He glanced sideways at her. They could learn a lot from you. Alexandra considered his words carefully. Teaching hadn't been part of her plan when she'd joined the military. But plans changed. Missions evolved. Adaptation was survival. I'll need full access to the training facilities, she said finally. And complete autonomy over the advanced marksmanship curriculum. Blackwood nodded. Done. Anything else? Alexandra Morgan looked toward the distant range where her impossible shots had found their mark shots, that rewrote what many considered physically possible with current technology. Yes, she said quietly. I want to start them at 2,000 meters and work up from there. In real-world operations, our enemies are getting better at avoiding close engagements. The snipers we train need to be capable of reaching out much further than they think possible. As they reached the command building, Blackwood extended his hand. Welcome aboard, Chief Morgan. I think you're going to change how we define impossible around here. Alexandra shook his hand firmly, her quiet confidence unmistakable. That's the plan, sir. That's always been the plan. The desert heat had barely subsided when Alexandra reported for her first day as lead instructor at the Naval Special Warfare Advanced Training Command. The facility, a sprawling complex of shooting ranges, tactical training houses, and classroom buildings, was already buzzing with activity despite the early hour. Commander Blackwood had wasted no time integrating her into the training cadre, announcing her arrival to the other instructors the previous afternoon. The reactions had been predictably mixed. Some, like Master Chief Peterson, a 20-year veteran with multiple combat deployments, had nodded in quiet acknowledgement of her record. Others had been more openly skeptical, their sideways glances and whispered comments revealing doubts about whether her shooting demonstration had been luck or legitimate skill. Alexandra entered the main briefing room, where 8 men in tactical instructors' uniforms were already gathered. Their conversation ceased abruptly as she approached, creating that familiar silence she'd encountered throughout her career. Gentlemen, she said calmly, setting her notebook on the podium. I'm Chief Morgan. Commander Blackwood has assigned me to lead the extreme long-distance engagement portion of the Advanced Sniper Program. A man with salt and pepper hair and the weathered face of a career operator stepped forward. Chief Peterson, he introduced himself. We've heard about your demonstration yesterday. 3,000 meters is impressive if consistent. Alexandra met his gaze evenly. 5 for 5 center mass. I'd be happy to repeat the demonstration if anyone has doubts. Peterson's expression remained neutral, but something in his eyes shifted, a professional curiosity replacing initial skepticism. That won't be necessary. We're all professionals here. The question is what you can teach our candidates that they can't learn from experienced combat snipers who've been instructing for years. It was a fair question, delivered without hostility, but with the directness characteristic of special operations personnel. Alexandra recognized it as both challenge and opportunity, the chance to establish her credibility not through rank or reputation, but through demonstrable knowledge. "Perspective," she replied simply. "In my experience, the limitations most snipers face aren't technical or equipment-based, they're psychological. We're trained to believe certain distances are maximum effective range, when those limits are often self-imposed." She moved to the whiteboard and began writing, her movements efficient and precise. Environmental factors, ballistic coefficients, powder temperature consistency, these all matter. But the difference between a 1,500-meter shooter and a 3,000-meter shooter often comes down to who's willing to take the shot in the first place. For the next 30 minutes, Alexandra outlined her approach to extreme distance marksmanship, detailing techniques she'd developed through years of field experience and private experimentation. She spoke with quiet authority, her explanations rooted in physics and practical application rather than theory. When she finished, the room remained silent for several moments. Then Peterson nodded slowly. "Unorthodox," he said, "but sound. When do you want to start?" Alexandra checked her watch. "The candidates arrive tomorrow. I'd like to spend today reviewing the current curriculum and making adjustments. Then I'll need each of you to meet me at the 1,000-meter range this afternoon." "For what purpose?" asked another instructor, his tone carrying a hint of defensiveness. "Because," Alexandra replied evenly, "I need to understand your capabilities before I can effectively work with you. I'm not here to replace your experience, I'm here to supplement it. But that requires knowing your baseline." By mid-afternoon, word had spread throughout the command about the female chief who was testing the instructors themselves. When Alexandra arrived at the range, she found not just the 8 instructors from her program, but several others from adjacent units, all curious to see what would happen. Commander Blackwood stood off to one side, arms crossed, watching the proceedings with interest. He'd approved her unorthodox approach, but made it clear she was responsible for the consequences, good or bad. "This isn't a competition," Alexandra explained as the instructors prepared their rifles. "It's a calibration. I need to understand how you approach long-distance engagements, so we can develop a common language for the training program." Over the next 3 hours, she observed each instructor's technique, asking questions about their decision-making processes, noting their adjustments for environmental conditions, and analyzing their results. Rather than critique their performance directly, she asked questions that led them to identify their own inconsistencies and limitations. "Why did you adjust your scope to OA left after your third shot?" she asked Peterson after his shooting sequence. "Wind shifted," he replied confidently. "Felt it on my cheek." Alexandra nodded. The wind flag at 600 meters didn't move. Neither did the one at 800. "What made you certain the wind had changed at the target?" Peterson paused, considering. "Instinct," he said finally. 20 years behind a rifle teaches you things instruments can't measure. "Instinct has value," Alexandra acknowledged. "But at extreme distances, even subtle confirmation bias can mean the difference between hitting your target and missing by meters. Let's try something." She set up a blind shooting exercise, where the instructors couldn't see the targets directly, receiving only the minimal information a spotter would provide in field conditions. The results were revealing. Even experienced snipers showed significant degradation in accuracy when forced to rely entirely on calculated data rather than visual feedback. By the end of the day, something had shifted in the instructors' attitudes. The initial skepticism hadn't disappeared entirely, but it had been replaced by professional curiosity. Alexandra hadn't attempted to prove she was better. She'd demonstrated that she thought differently about the problems they all faced. "Interesting approach," Commander Blackwood commented as they walked back to the command center. "Most new instructors would have tried to establish dominance by outshooting everyone." "This isn't about who shoots best," Alexandra replied. It's about creating a cohesive team that can effectively teach advanced techniques. The instructors needed to understand my methodology, not just my capabilities. Blackwood nodded thoughtfully. The candidates arrive at 0600 tomorrow. 12 operators from various SEAL teams, all experienced, all convinced they already know everything worth knowing about long-distance shooting. What's your plan for them? Alexandra smiled slightly, the first genuine smile Blackwood had seen from her. I'm going to show them how much they don't know. The following morning, 12 Navy SEALs stood at rigid attention on the main firing range, their faces betraying varying degrees of interest and skepticism as Alexandra approached. All were combat veterans with multiple deployments. All had completed advanced sniper training. All had taken lives through the precision application of violence at distance. Now they were being asked to accept instruction from a woman many had heard of only through rumors. At ease, Alexandra said, her voice carrying across the range without shouting. I'm Chief Morgan. For the next 6 weeks, I'll be leading your training in extreme long-distance engagement techniques. Some of you may be wondering why you're here when you've already completed advanced sniper courses. She paused, her eyes moving across the assembled operators. The battlefield is evolving. Our adversaries are becoming more sophisticated in their counter-sniper methods. The days of reliable 800-meter engagement zones are ending. To maintain tactical superiority, we need to push beyond conventional limitations. One of the candidates, a broad-shouldered senior chief with a thick beard, raised his hand. With respect, Chief, the laws of physics don't change because the battlefield does. There are fundamental limits to how far you can accurately shoot, especially in combat conditions. Alexandra nodded, acknowledging his point. You're absolutely right, Senior Chief. Reeves, he supplied. Ryan Reeves. Senior Chief Reeves is correct about physics, Alexandra continued, addressing the entire group. But what if I told you that most of what you've learned about those limitations is based on outdated assumptions and unnecessary constraints? She gestured toward a row of rifle cases near the firing line. Those are Barrett MRADMK-22s with Schmidt and Bender PMII 5 to 25 by 56. Scopes, the newest system being fielded to Special Operations Units. Before today, how many of you have fired this platform beyond 1,500 meters? None of the operators raised their hands. How many of you believe you could consistently hit man-sized targets at 2,500 meters with this system under field conditions? Again, no hands raised. That's what I thought, Alexandra said. By the end of this course, every one of you will be capable of making those shots with consistency. Not because the rifles are magical, but because you'll understand how to transcend the limitations you've accepted as absolute. For the next hour, Alexandra outlined the course structure, a progressive program that would systematically deconstruct and rebuild their understanding of extreme distance shooting. She spoke with quiet confidence, her explanations precise and rooted in practical experience rather than theoretical knowledge. Today we establish baselines, she concluded. I need to understand your current capabilities before we can effectively move forward. Prepare your equipment for qualification shooting at standard distances, 600, 800, and 1,000 meters. The operators moved with practiced efficiency, setting up their rifles and conducting pre-firing checks. Alexandra moved among them, observing their procedures without comment, noting the small variations in technique that revealed their training backgrounds and personal preferences. When they began shooting, she watched not just their results but their processes, how they calculated adjustments, how they handled their weapons, how they responded to changing conditions. By mid-morning, she had developed a clear picture of their strengths and limitations. Acceptable performance, she announced when they finished the qualification course. All of you meet the standards for qualified snipers. But this course isn't about meeting standards, it's about exceeding them. She activated a target system that deployed steel silhouettes at 1,500 meters, the outer edge of conventional effective range for the platform they were using. Senior Chief Reeves, you scored highest on the qualification. Would you demonstrate an engagement at this distance? Reeves moved to the firing position with confident precision. He took his time, calculating adjustments for distance, wind, and atmospheric conditions before settling behind his rifle. His breathing slowed, his body becoming perfectly still as he prepared to take the shot. The rifle cracked, and downrange the target registered a hit just right of center mass. Good shot, Alexandra acknowledged. Now, make 4 more in succession without recalculating between shots. Reeves frowned slightly but returned to position. His next 4 shots produced a scattered pattern 1 miss, 1 edge hit, and 2 solid impacts at different points on the target. This is why consistency matters more than occasional accuracy, Alexandra explained to the group. In combat, you rarely get ideal conditions for calculation. You need to develop systems that produce reliable results under pressure. For the remainder of the day, she worked with each operator individually, identifying specific areas for improvement, while maintaining a professional detachment that neither criticized nor coddled. By the time they broke for the evening, the initial skepticism had begun to crack, replaced by the grudging respect that elite operators reserve for those who demonstrate genuine expertise. Chief Morgan, Senior Chief Reeves approached as the others packed their equipment. I've got a question that's been bothering me. Go ahead, Senior Chief. The rumors about your shot in Syria 3,100 meters through a window during a sandstorm. Is that true? Alexandra's expression revealed nothing. You know I can't discuss operational details, Senior Chief. Of course, he nodded. But hypothetically speaking, what would make such a shot possible when everything we've been taught says it isn't? She considered his question carefully, recognizing the genuine professional curiosity behind it. Hypothetically, she finally replied, the difference between impossible and possible often comes down to one factor, whether you've accepted the limitation as truth. That evening, Alexandra sat alone in her quarters, methodically cleaning her personal rifle, the custom Barrett M82A1 that had accompanied her on countless missions. The weapon was more than a tool. It was a physical manifestation of her journey, bearing the subtle marks and modifications that told the story of her evolution as a sniper. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. Commander Blackwood stood in the hallway, a folder tucked under his arm. Got a minute, Chief? Alexandra set aside the rifle component she'd been working on. Of course, sir. Blackwood entered, his eyes briefly taking in the meticulously organized room, before settling on the partially disassembled rifle. I've been reviewing your personnel file. What parts of it aren't redacted anyway? Your path to this point hasn't been easy. No path worth taking ever is, sir. He nodded, opening the folder to reveal a set of satellite images. I received these from intelligence this morning. Thought you might find them interesting. Alexandra examined the images' aerial views of a compound in a mountainous region, with annotations indicating distances and approach routes. Where is this? Northern Afghanistan. Taliban leadership has been using it as a safe house, coordinating attacks on coalition forces from what they believe is a secure location. The nearest approach point is 2,800 meters away, across a valley with unpredictable wind conditions. Alexandra looked up, understanding dawning. You're planning an operation. Considering one, Blackwood corrected. The intelligence is solid, but the physical constraints make conventional approaches impossible. Even with air support, the terrain offers too many escape routes. A precision strike would be the only option, but nobody believes a shot at that distance is reliable enough to risk an operation. Alexandra finished for him. Nobody except you, Blackwood confirmed. Your training program has 6 weeks to produce operators capable of making that shot. If you succeed, this becomes a viable operation. If not, he left the sentence unfinished, but the implication was clear. This wasn't just about training anymore, it was about operationalizing her methods to address real-world tactical challenges. "I'll need complete autonomy in the training approach," Alexandra said after considering for a moment. "Some of what I plan to teach goes against established doctrine." "You have it," Blackwood replied. "But I need regular progress updates. And I need to know that what you're teaching can be replicated, not just by unique talents like yourself, but by properly trained operators." After he left, Alexandra returned to her rifle, her mind already restructuring the training program to address this new imperative. The challenge wasn't just teaching exceptional shooting. It was systematizing what had previously been considered almost mystical skill into repeatable, transferable methodology. The following morning, Alexandra arrived at the range before dawn, using the quiet hours to set up what would become the centerpiece of her training approach. A progressive distance course that would push the operators beyond their perceived limitations in carefully measured increments. When the operators arrived at 0600, they found her waiting with a completely restructured range configuration and a determined expression that immediately silenced the usual pre-training conversations. "Yesterday you demonstrated your current capabilities," she began without preamble. "Today we start moving beyond them. We're going to reconstruct your understanding of long-distance shooting from the ground up, not just the mechanics, but the mindset." She gestured to a row of workstations set up near the firing line, each equipped with calculators, weather instruments, and ballistic charts. Precision at extreme distances isn't about natural talent. It's about systems thinking, understanding how every variable interacts, and developing protocols that account for them all simultaneously. For the next 10 hours, Alexandra immersed the operators in the mathematics and physics of extreme distance ballistics. She broke down every aspect of the bullet's journey from muzzle to target, demonstrating how conventional calculations became increasingly unreliable beyond certain distances. "The models you've been taught work well to 1,200 meters, she explained, drawing complex trajectory arcs on a whiteboard. "Beyond that, you need to account for variables most training programs treat as negligible: the Coriolis effect, atmospheric refraction, bullet yaw harmonics. These aren't theoretical concerns at 2,500 meters. They're the difference between hitting your target and missing by feet." Senior Chief Reeves, who had emerged as the informal leader among the operators, raised his hand. "With respect, Chief, how do you calculate all these factors in field conditions? We can't exactly carry advanced computer systems on covert operations." Alexandra smiled slightly, the first genuine expression the operators had seen from her. "That's the right question, Senior Chief. The answer is that you don't calculate them conventionally. You develop intuitive systems that incorporate them all simultaneously." She pulled out a small notebook filled with handwritten tables and diagrams. "This is my personal data book from the last 8 years. Every shot, every condition, every result, all documented and analyzed. By the end of this course, each of you will have started building your own." As the day progressed, Alexandra moved them from theory to application, having them conduct firing exercises that specifically isolated individual variables' wind effects, temperature changes, barometric pressure shifts. Rather than telling them what to expect, she let them discover the patterns themselves, guiding their analysis with carefully framed questions. "Why did your third shot impact 8 inches lower than your calculation predicted?" she asked one operator after a particular sequence. "Temperature drop," he guessed. "The air density increased as the sun began setting." "Possible," she acknowledged. "But look at your chronograph readings. What happened to your muzzle velocity on that shot?" The operator checked his data, recognition dawning. "It decreased by almost 30 feet per second." "Exactly. Your barrel temperature changed as you fired successive rounds. At extreme distances, Even small velocity changes create significant point-of-impact shifts. This is why professional bencherous shooters cook off their barrels to a consistent temperature before competition. By the end of the day, the operators were mentally exhausted, but engaged in a way none of them had expected. Alexandra had systematically deconstructed their understanding of their craft and begun rebuilding it with greater precision and nuance. As they packed their equipment, Senior Chief Reeves approached her again. "Chief Morgan, I owe you an apology." Alexandra looked up from her notes. "For what?" "For assuming this course would be a waste of time. I've been shooting professionally for 15 years, including multiple combat deployments. I thought I knew everything worth knowing about this platform." He gestured toward his rifle case. "Today you showed me how much I still have to learn. That's humbling." Alexandra nodded, understanding exactly what that admission cost a man of his experience and position. "The best shooters I've known have all had one thing in common. Senior Chief, they never stopped being students of their craft." That night, as she updated her training notes, Alexandra allowed herself a moment of cautious optimism. The operators had shown not just the physical capability, but the mental flexibility to absorb her methods. Whether that would translate to consistent performance at the distances required for the Afghanistan operation remained to be seen, but the foundation was being laid. The real challenge would come tomorrow, when she would push them beyond their established comfort zones and into the distances they currently believed impossible. Breaking through psychological barriers was often harder than mastering technical skills, especially for operators who had built careers on confidence in their capabilities. As she closed her notebook, her thoughts turned to the compound and those satellite images. Somewhere in those mountains, men were planning violence against American forces, believing themselves safely beyond reach. They didn't know that distance itself was a barrier being systematically dismantled, one calculated shot at a time. The third day of training began before sunrise, with Alexandra waiting silently as the operators assembled on the firing line. Overnight, she had reconfigured the range for the next phase, what she privately thought of as the psychological barrier stage of training. Today would determine whether her students could transcend the mental limitations that held back even the most skilled conventional snipers. "Yesterday we established the theory," she began once everyone had arrived. "Today we put it into practice at distances most of you consider beyond reliable engagement range." She gestured downrange where targets had been placed at progressive distances, 1,500, 1,800, 2,100, and 2,400 meters. "We'll begin at 1,500 comfortable territory for qualified snipers. Then we'll move outward in stages, applying the calculations and systems we developed yesterday." Senior Chief Reeves studied the distant targets through his spotting scope, his expression skeptical. "The wind's variable today, gusting between 6 and 12 miles per hour, shifting directions between valleys. At 2,400 meters, that's going to create unpredictable deflection." "Exactly," Alexandra nodded. "Real-world conditions are rarely ideal. Today isn't about perfect scores. It's about developing adaptive systems that function despite environmental challenges." She walked to a table where several devices were arranged neatly. "These are Kestrel weather meters with applied ballistics calculators, standard equipment for precision shooters. You've all used them before. Today, half of you will use them for your calculations, while the other half will use the analog systems I taught you yesterday." This announcement was met with concerned murmurs. One operator, Lieutenant Wilson, the only officer among the students, spoke up. "With respect, Chief, analog calculations can't possibly match the precision of digital instruments at these distances." "That's the conventional wisdom," Alexandra acknowledged. "Let's test it empirically instead of accepting it as given." She divided them into pairs, each consisting of one shooter using digital calculations and one using analog methods. As they began engaging targets at 1,500 meters, the results were predictably similar. Both approaches produced consistent hits, with digital calculations showing a slight edge in precision. But as they moved to the 1,800-meter targets, interesting patterns emerged. The digital shooters maintained their consistency, while the analog shooters initially struggled, but then began adapting more quickly to changing conditions. "Notice what's happening," Alexandra said as they analyzed their shot groups. The digital systems provide precise calculations for specific conditions at the moment of measurement. But when conditions change between measurements, those calculations become progressively less reliable. She pointed to Lieutenant Wilson's target, where his shots had gradually drifted right as the wind shifted. The analog approach forces continuous awareness of environmental changes. You're developing an intuitive understanding of how conditions affect your bullet's path, rather than relying on periodic instrument readings. As they progressed to the 2,100-meter targets, the psychological barriers became more apparent. Several operators hesitated before firing, visibly uncomfortable with engaging targets at distances they'd been trained to consider beyond reliable range. "This is where mental limitations become physical limitations," Alexandra explained. "You've been taught that consistency beyond 1,500 meters is unlikely, so you approach these shots differently, more tentative, less confident. That hesitation translates directly to poorer performance." She moved behind Senior Chief Reeves, who was preparing for his first shot at the 2,100-meter target. "What's your maximum confirmed kill distance, Senior Chief?" 1,640 meters in Afghanistan, he replied without looking up from his scope. "Mountains near Kandahar. Taliban commander. Conditions were nearly perfect." "And you consider that exceptional?" "It's well above average for combat engagements." Alexandra nodded. "Now ask yourself, what physical law changed between 1,640 meters and where we are now? Is there some magical barrier that makes consistent accuracy impossible beyond a certain range?" Reeves thought for a moment. No physical law changed, but the variables compound exponentially with distance. The margin for error becomes so small that consistency becomes statistically improbable. "Improbable is not the same as impossible," Alexandra countered. "The question is whether you can develop systems that account for those variables reliably enough to shift the probability in your favor." Throughout the day, she worked with each operator individually, addressing their specific mental blocks and technical limitations. Some struggled with wind calls at extreme distances. Others had trouble maintaining proper follow-through during extended shooting sessions. A few were simply battling years of ingrained beliefs about what was possible. By mid-afternoon, they had reached the 2,400-meter targets, a distance nearly twice what most considered the maximum effective range of their platform. To everyone's surprise, hits were still occurring, though with less consistency. 80% hit rate at 2,400 meters, Lieutenant Wilson noted as they analyzed the final results. "That's unprecedented for a group at this distance." "It's still not good enough," Alexandra replied, her expression serious. "In combat operations, most of the time isn't acceptable when lives depend on first-round impacts." She gathered them around a tactical table where she had prepared a detailed presentation. "Tomorrow we begin specialized training in environmental reading, developing your ability to process visual indicators that most spotters and shooters overlook. The difference between 80% and 95%. Accuracy at these distances often comes down to subtle cues that exist in plain sight, but remain unrecognized." As the operators dispersed for the evening, Master Chief Peterson, who had been observing the day's training, approached Alexandra. "Remarkable progress," he said, his initial skepticism notably absent. "I've never seen a group progress this quickly to effective engagement beyond 2,000 meters." Alexandra nodded acknowledgement, but remained focused on her notes. "They're good operators with solid foundations. We're just expanding their conceptual framework." Peterson studied her for a moment. Commander Blackwood mentioned a potential operation, something requiring these extreme distance capabilities. Is that why you're pushing them so hard? I push them because the battlefield demands it, she replied evenly. Our adversaries are adapting. We need to stay ahead of their adaptations. Fair enough, Peterson conceded. But I've been doing this a long time. Chief, I know the difference between general readiness training and mission-specific preparation. This has all the hallmarks of the latter. Alexandra finally looked up, meeting his experienced gaze. If that were the case, Master Chief, would it concern you? Not if the mission justifies the means, he replied without hesitation. These men are operators. They understand risk. What concerns me is whether they'll have enough time to fully internalize what you're teaching before they need to apply it under pressure. It was a legitimate concern, one that had been weighing on Alexandra as well. 6 weeks had initially seemed adequate for the training program, but if operational requirements accelerated the timeline, shortcuts would become necessary. They'll be ready, she said with quiet confidence. Some sooner than others, but they'll get there. That evening, Alexandra was reviewing the day's performance metrics in her quarters when a knock came at her door. Commander Blackwood stood in the hallway, his expression suggesting urgent business. We need to talk, he said without preamble. Intelligence update on the Afghanistan compound. There's been a development. Alexandra invited him in, clearing space on her desk for the folder he carried. Inside were fresh satellite images showing increased activity around the target location. Analysis indicates they're preparing to move, Blackwood explained, pointing to specific areas of the compound. Vehicle preparation, supply consolidation, communication patterns all consistent with imminent relocation. Our window is closing. Alexandra studied the images carefully. How long? Intelligence estimates 2 weeks maximum. Probably less. The implications were immediate and significant. The training program is designed for 6 weeks, sir. We're 3 days in. Even accelerated, we'd need at least 3 weeks to reach the proficiency levels required for this operation. Blackwood nodded grimly. I understand. But this target represents a critical threat. 3 senior Taliban commanders, an ISIS liaison, and evidence suggesting they're planning a coordinated attack on coalition forces in Kabul. If they relocate, we may lose the opportunity altogether. Alexandra considered the options, mentally calculating what could be accomplished in a compressed time frame. The operators are progressing faster than expected. If we focus exclusively on the specific skills needed for this operation rather than comprehensive development, we might have them ready in 2 weeks. Might isn't good enough for an operation of this significance, Blackwood countered. We need certainty. Alexandra was quiet for a moment, weighing alternatives before speaking. There is another option, sir. I'm listening. I could take the shot. Blackwood's expression registered immediate concern. After what happened in Syria, the political fallout nearly ended your career. If something goes wrong, nothing will go wrong, Alexandra interrupted, her confidence absolute. The Syria operation failed because of intelligence errors, not marksmanship. The shot itself was successful. Even so, you're an instructor now, not an operational asset. Deploying you would require special authorization from Naval Special Warfare Command. Then request it, she said simply, while continuing the training program at maximum intensity. If the operators reach required proficiency in time, they take the mission. If not, I provide overwatch while they handle infill and security. Blackwood considered this approach, clearly weighing operational necessities against policy constraints. I'll take it up the chain, he finally agreed. But continue preparing the operators as if they're taking the shot. We need viable options. The following morning, Alexandra adjusted the training program to reflect the compressed timeline. She eliminated peripheral skills development, focusing exclusively on the specific capabilities required for the Afghanistan operation. "Today we're shifting focus," she announced to the assembled operators. "We'll be concentrating on environmental reading in mountainous terrain with variable wind conditions, specifically identifying visual indicators that allow for accurate wind calling at extreme distances." She displayed topographical maps and aerial imagery that, while not specifically identified as Afghanistan, closely resembled the actual target area. Complex terrain creates unique challenges for extreme distance shooting. Wind flows through valleys and around peaks in ways that can't be predicted by instruments alone. You need to develop the ability to read the landscape and visualize the invisible. Throughout the day, she introduced techniques rarely taught in conventional sniper schools, using mirage readings from multiple distances to construct a three-dimensional understanding of wind patterns, identifying natural indicators like vegetation movement to track air currents, and developing mental models of how terrain features affect atmospheric flow. Senior Chief Reeves, who had quickly emerged as the most adaptable student, demonstrated particular aptitude for these advanced techniques. His background in mountaineering gave him an intuitive understanding of how air moved through complex terrain. "You're visualizing the wind correctly," Alexandra noted as she observed his calculations. Most shooters make the mistake of thinking in two dimensions. But wind in mountains moves like water flowing around obstacles, compressing through narrow passes, creating eddies and currents invisible to conventional measurement. By late afternoon, she had them engaging targets at 2,000 meters in a specially designed range that simulated wind conditions created by mountainous terrain. Using various obstacles and artificial wind sources, she created a complex environment that forced them to apply their newly developed skills in practical scenarios. "This is where theory meets application," she explained as they analyzed their results. "In the field, you won't have time for extended calculations. You need to develop an intuitive system that processes environmental information quickly and accurately." After the formal training concluded, she asked Senior Chief Reeves to remain behind. As the others departed, she led him to a private range where a specialized setup had been prepared. "What's this about, Chief?" he asked as they approached. "Accelerated development," Alexandra replied. "You're progressing faster than the others. I want to see how far we can push your capabilities in a compressed time frame." For the next 2 hours, she worked with him one-on-one, introducing advanced techniques that built upon his natural aptitudes. By sunset, he was consistently hitting targets at 2,600 meters, a remarkable achievement for just 4 days of specialized training. "You have a gift, Senior Chief," Alexandra acknowledged as they packed their equipment. "The question is whether you can develop it sufficiently within extremely tight constraints." Reeves studied her carefully. "This isn't theoretical training anymore, is it? There's an actual operation pending that requires these capabilities." Alexandra neither confirmed nor denied, maintaining operational security despite the implications of their accelerated training. "Every skill we develop has practical applications. How and when they might be applied isn't our concern at this stage." "With respect, Chief, that's bullshit," Reeves replied bluntly. "I've been doing this long enough to recognize mission-specific preparation. The terrain simulations, the compressed timeline, the focus on particular environmental conditions. You're preparing us for something specific and imminent." His perception was too accurate to dismiss. Alexandra decided that limited transparency might actually enhance his development. "Let's assume you're right," she said carefully. "What would that mean for your approach to this training?" "It would mean I need to know the exact parameters we're working toward," he answered without hesitation. "Distance, elevation differential, expected weather conditions, available shooting positions, everything that would affect the shot." Alexandra considered this request, weighing operational security against training effectiveness. Finally, she made a decision. "Hypothetically," she began, choosing her words with precision. A shot between 2,800 and 3,000 meters. From an elevated position, through mountain valleys with complex wind patterns. At a target in a compound with multiple structures. Dawn engagement to minimize mirage interference, but requiring adjustment for transitional lighting conditions. Reeves absorbed this information, mentally calculating the implications. That's beyond anything attempted in conventional operations. The success probability would be extremely low unless you have systems that account for variables most snipers consider unmanageable, Alexandra finished for him. That's precisely what I'm teaching you. The following week proceeded at an intensified pace, with training days often extending 14 hours or more. Alexandra pushed the operators relentlessly, introducing increasingly complex scenarios while maintaining focus on the specific skills required for the Afghanistan operation. Commander Blackwood provided regular updates on the intelligence situation, each report confirming that their window was indeed closing. The compound showed continuing signs of imminent departure, with vehicle preparation nearly complete and communication suggesting a move within 7 to 10 days. On the 8th day of training, Alexandra arranged a practical evaluation to assess their progress. The scenario closely mirrored the actual operation parameters, a shooting position in elevated terrain, targets at approximately 2,900 meters, and complex wind conditions created by rugged topography. This isn't just an exercise, she told them as they prepared. It's a qualification. Your performance today will determine your readiness for real-world application of these skills. The results were mixed but encouraging. Senior Chief Reeves achieved an 85% hit rate. At the extreme distance, remarkable progress, but still short of the near certainty required for a critical operation. Lieutenant Wilson and 2 other operators managed 70 to 75% consistency, while the remainder struggled to exceed 60%. Significant improvement, Alexandra acknowledged during the post-exercise debrief, but not yet where we need to be for operational application. That evening, Commander Blackwood called her to his office for a private briefing. I've received word from Naval Special Warfare Command, he began once the door was closed. They've approved your participation in the operation if the operators don't reach required proficiency levels in time. Alexandra nodded, having expected this outcome given the high-value target and closing window of opportunity. And the operators' progress? Senior Chief Reeves is the closest to required standards, but even he's not there yet. The others are progressing well, but I'm concerned about rushing them into an operation requiring this level of precision. I share that concern, Alexandra agreed. They're developing remarkably fast, but extreme distance shooting isn't just about technical skills, it's about confidence and psychological readiness. Rushing that development could undermine both. Blackwood leaned back in his chair, studying her carefully. You're certain you can make the shot if required? Yes, she replied without hesitation. The conditions are challenging, but within my capabilities. I've made similar shots under comparable circumstances. The commander nodded slowly. Then we proceed with dual preparation. Continue training the operators at maximum intensity, with particular focus on Senior Chief Reeves. Meanwhile, you'll prepare as primary shooter while they handle security and support elements. The final days of preparation saw Alexandra dividing her time between instructing the operators and conducting her own specialized preparations for the mission. She spent hours studying satellite imagery and topographical data, constructing mental models of the wind patterns she would likely encounter in the target area. Senior Chief Reeves continued to progress rapidly, reaching 90% consistency at the required distance by the 12th day of training, an almost miraculous rate of development that spoke to both his natural ability and Alexandra's teaching methods. You're almost there, she told him during a private evaluation session. The remaining gap isn't technical, it's psychological. You need absolute certainty in your capability, before you can achieve absolute consistency. Reeves nodded, understanding the distinction. How did you develop that certainty? What was your breakthrough moment? Alexandra was quiet for a moment, considering whether to share something she rarely discussed. Finally, she decided that his development justified the disclosure. My first combat deployment, Afghanistan, 2014, she began, her voice measured and calm. Our patrol was ambushed in a narrow valley. 3 wounded immediately, including our medic. The attackers were positioned on a ridge 1,720 meters away beyond what anyone considered practical engagement range for the rifle I was carrying. She paused, the memory crystal clear despite the years that had passed. The conventional wisdom said consistent hits weren't possible at that distance with that platform. But conventional wisdom wouldn't save my team. I had to transcend it or watch them die one by one. What did you do? Reeves asked quietly. I stopped thinking about probability and focused entirely on certainty. I eliminated every variable I could control: breathing, position, trigger squeeze, and developed instantaneous calculations for those I couldn't. 8 shots, 8 hits. The attack broke off and we evacuated our wounded. She looked at him directly. That was my moment when I realized that the limitations I'd accepted weren't laws of physics but constructs of collective belief. Break through that belief, and possibilities expand exponentially. The day before the operation was scheduled to launch, Commander Blackwood called a final briefing with Alexandra, Senior Chief Reeves, and the mission planning team. The intelligence was now definitive. The Taliban leadership would be moving within 36 hours, creating a narrow window of opportunity for the operation. Final decision time, Blackwood announced, looking between Alexandra and Reeves. Chief Morgan will deploy as primary shooter with Senior Chief Reeves as secondary. The remainder of the team will handle infiltration, security, and exfiltration. Any questions? Reeves glanced at Alexandra before addressing the commander. Sir, with respect, I believe Chief Morgan should be designated as spotter rather than primary shooter. This unexpected statement drew surprised looks from everyone in the room. Blackwood frowned slightly. You don't feel ready for the secondary position, Senior Chief. On the contrary, sir, Reeves replied confidently. I believe I'm ready for the primary position, with Chief Morgan supporting as spotter. My consistency has reached 93% at the required distance during today's final qualification. He turned to Alexandra. You're the better shooter, there's no question about that. But this isn't about individual capability. It's about the future of our operational approach. If I take this shot successfully, it validates the entire training methodology you've developed and opens the door for implementing it across the special operations community. Alexandra considered his reasoning carefully. He wasn't wrong. There were strategic implications beyond this specific mission. Having an operator successfully execute a shot at this distance would carry more institutional weight than having her do it. It's your call, Chief, Blackwood said, deferring to her assessment of Reeves' readiness. After a long moment, Alexandra nodded. Senior Chief Reeves is ready. I'll operate as spotter and secondary if needed, but he takes the primary shot. The infiltration occurred under cover of darkness, with 2 MH-60 Blackhawks inserting the team 20 miles from the target area. From there, they moved on foot through rugged mountain terrain, maintaining communication discipline and avoiding local populations. By pre-dawn, Alexandra and Senior Chief Reeves had reached the designated shooting position of Alexandra and Senior Chief Reeves, rocky outcropping providing clear line of sight to the compound across a deep valley. The distance, confirmed by laser rangefinder, was 2,946 meters. Wind reading? Reeves asked as he established his position behind his rifle. Alexandra studied the valley through her spotting scope, observing the subtle indicators she'd trained him to recognize: dust movement, vegetation bending, heat mirage patterns. Primary valley floor shows 6 miles per hour, right to left. Secondary currents in the upper elevations moving left to right at approximately 4 miles per hour. Temperature 58 degrees. Humidity 22%. Barometric pressure 2491. Reeves made his calculations with calm precision, adjusting his scope to account for the extreme distance and complex environmental factors. His breathing slowed as he settled behind the rifle, his body becoming perfectly still. Through her spotting scope, Alexandra could see the compound coming to life in the early morning light. 3 vehicles were being prepared near the main building, confirming intelligence that departure was imminent. Armed guards patrolled the perimeter while figures moved between structures. "Target confirmed," she said quietly as a man matching their primary target's description emerged from the main building. 3-meter drop from your position. Currently stationary near the eastern vehicle. Reeves made final adjustments, his expression reflecting complete concentration. "Send it?" he asked, seeking her confirmation that conditions were optimal. Alexandra conducted one final environmental scan, verifying that all variables remained within calculated parameters. "Send it," she confirmed. The rifle's report shattered the pre-dawn stillness, echoing across the valley as the .50 caliber round began its journey toward the target nearly 2 miles away. Alexandra tracked its flight path through her high-powered spotting scope, watching as the bullet arced through space, affected by gravity, wind currents, and the dozen other factors they had so carefully calculated. 3 seconds later, an eternity in a sniper's world, the target crumpled to the ground as the round found its mark with devastating precision. Instant death at a distance, previously considered beyond reliable engagement capability. "Hit confirmed," Alexandra announced, her voice professional despite the remarkable achievement they had just witnessed. "Target down." Clean shot. The compound erupted into chaos, guards rushing toward their fallen leader while others sought cover from an attack whose origin they couldn't determine. The extreme distance of the shot had provided perfect security. No sound of the rifle had reached them before the bullet itself. "Secondary targets?" Reeves asked, already cycling his bolt to chamber another round. "Negative," Alexandra replied after confirming through her scope. "Primary package secured. All teams, execute extraction plan Alpha." As they methodically broke down their position and prepared to withdraw, Reeves paused briefly. "That shot shouldn't have been possible according to everything I was taught before meeting you." Alexandra smiled slightly as she packed her spotting scope. "Then perhaps it's time to rewrite what's taught." Their extraction proceeded without incident, the team moving quickly through predetermined routes to the pickup zone where the Blackhawks would retrieve them. By nightfall, they were back at base, mission accomplished with surgical precision. The debriefing was unusually well attended, with senior officers from multiple commands present to hear first-hand accounts of the unprecedented operation. Commander Blackwood conducted the session, his pride evident as Senior Chief Reeves described the shot and Alexandra detailed the environmental calculations that had made it possible. 2,946 meters, one senior officer repeated, shaking his head in amazement. "That exceeds any confirmed kill in U.S. military history. The operational implications are significant. More significant is the methodology that made it possible," Blackwood noted. "Chief Morgan's training approach has proven that with proper instruction, our operators can consistently engage targets at distances previously considered beyond reliable range." In the weeks that followed, Alexandra's training program received official endorsement from Naval Special Warfare Command. What had begun as a specialized course for 12 operators expanded into a formal curriculum that would eventually be implemented across all special operations sniper programs. Senior Chief Reeves became the first instructor certified to teach the new methodology, working alongside Alexandra to refine the curriculum based on operational experience and practical application. Their partnership, born of initial skepticism transformed into mutual respect, became the foundation for a revolution in military long-distance marksmanship. 6 months later, Alexandra stood on the same Nevada range where she had first demonstrated her extraordinary capabilities to a doubting Commander Blackwood. Now she watched as 24 students drawn from Army, Navy, Marine, and Air Force Special Operations units engaged targets at distances once considered impossible. "Quite a change from your first day here," Blackwood observed as he joined her near the observation platform. "From skepticism to standard practice in less than a year." Alexandra nodded, watching as Senior Chief Reeves, now Master Chief Reeves, guided a young Army sniper through complex wind calculations. "The capabilities were always possible. We just needed to break through the psychological barriers limiting our perception of what could be achieved. And you did that," Blackwood acknowledged, "by showing rather than telling. By proving that the impossible was merely improbable, and the improbable could become consistent with the right approach." As the training day concluded, the students gathered for a final briefing. Alexandra moved to the front of the group, her quiet authority drawing immediate attention. "Today you engaged targets at distances your previous training told you were beyond reliable range," she began. "Some of you succeeded consistently. Others are still developing the necessary skills. All of you are pushing beyond limitations that existed primarily in collective belief rather than physical reality." She gestured toward the distant targets, now barely visible in the fading light. "The difference between extraordinary and ordinary isn't natural talent or special equipment. It's the willingness to question established limitations and the discipline to systematically transcend them." Master Chief Reeves stepped forward, adding his perspective. 6 months ago, I was where many of you are now, skilled but constrained by accepted wisdom about what was possible. Chief Morgan didn't just teach me new techniques. She fundamentally changed my understanding of what constitutes a limitation." As the students dispersed, Alexandra remained on the range, watching the Nevada sunset paint the distant mountains in gold and crimson. Her journey from outsider to revolutionary had not been without cost. The Syria operation still cast shadows, and there were still those who viewed her methods with skepticism. But the results spoke for themselves. American Special Operations snipers were now operating at distances that fundamentally changed battlefield dynamics, providing security and precision strike capabilities previously unimaginable. Lives were being saved, both of American forces and innocent civilians, through the ability to engage threats with unprecedented precision from previously impossible distances. "Where do we go from here?" Blackwood asked as they walked back toward the command center. "You've already rewritten what most considered the laws of practical ballistics." Alexandra smiled slightly, her eyes still on the distant horizon. "Distance was just the beginning," she replied. "There are other barriers waiting to be broken: urban environments with complex wind channels, maritime platforms with multiple stability variables, atmospheric conditions most consider prohibitive." She turned to face him, her quiet confidence unchanged despite all she had accomplished. "The only real limitation is the one we accept without question. Break through that, and every horizon becomes a new starting line." As darkness fell over the Nevada desert, the legacy of Alexandra Morgan, the quiet revolutionary, who had transformed military precision shooting, continued to expand with each student who learned to see limitations, not as boundaries but as challenges waiting to be overcome. Her name would never appear in public records or media reports, but within the shadowed world of special operations, it had become synonymous with a simple, powerful truth: the impossible is merely waiting for someone willing to question why it's considered so. 3 years after the groundbreaking Afghanistan operation, Alexandra Morgan stood at the edge of a different precipice. The advanced sniper school she had built from concept to reality now trained elite shooters from across all special operations commands. Her methodologies had been incorporated into official doctrine. and her record-breaking shot, now declassified as 2,946 meters, had remained unbroken despite numerous attempts by the world's best military snipers. "Chief Morgan," a voice called from behind her as she observed the morning qualification exercises. "They're ready for you in the briefing room." Alexandra nodded to the young petty officer, taking one last look at her students engaging targets at distances that would have been dismissed as fantasy just a few years earlier. The transformation in military long-distance shooting had been profound, but not without resistance. Traditional sniping doctrine had been entrenched for decades, and changing institutional thinking had proved more challenging than changing individual capabilities. Inside the briefing room, a collection of senior officers and civilian officials waited. Commander Blackwood, now Captain Blackwood following his promotion, stood at the head of the table, his expression revealing nothing about the purpose of this unexpected meeting. "Chief Morgan," he began formally, "thank you for joining us. These gentlemen are from Naval Special Warfare Command and the Office of Naval Research." He gestured toward the civilians. "And from DARPA's Special Projects Division." Alexandra took the offered seat, her calm demeanor masking the questions forming in her mind. DARPA's involvement suggested something well beyond routine military operations. "We've been following your work with considerable interest," said one of the civilians, a silver-haired man with the bearing of former military. "The methodologies you've developed for extreme distance precision shooting have implications far beyond their current applications." Captain Blackwood slid a folder across the table. "What you're about to see is classified top secret. It doesn't leave this room." Inside were satellite images of a remote facility nestled in the mountains of what appeared to be Central Asia. The compound was substantial, multiple buildings, security perimeters, and what looked like testing ranges extending into surrounding valleys. "This is a North Korean advanced weapons development facility," explained one of the Naval Special Warfare officers, "located in a remote region of China near their shared border. Officially, it doesn't exist. Unofficially, it's where their most advanced ballistic missile guidance systems are being tested." Alexandra studied the images carefully, her trained eye immediately assessing distances and terrain features. "What's the interest in this facility?" "Intelligence indicates they're preparing to test a new hypersonic delivery system," the DARPA representative explained. "One capable of evading current missile defense technologies. If successful, it represents a significant shift in strategic balance." Captain Blackwood took over the briefing. 2 months ago, the National Security Council authorized a covert operation to neutralize this threat before testing can be completed. Multiple approaches have been considered and rejected as too risky or likely to trigger international incidents. "Which brings us to you," continued the silver-haired civilian. "The facility's remote location and the surrounding terrain make conventional approaches impossible. Airstrikes would require violating Chinese airspace. Ground teams would need to cross hundreds of miles of heavily monitored territory." Alexandra looked up from the images, understanding beginning to dawn. "You're considering a precision strike." "Not considering," Blackwood corrected. "Planning. The question is whether it's even possible." The DARPA representative leaned forward. "The shortest approach to an effective firing position is here." He indicated a mountain ridge on the map. "The distance to the primary target, the project's chief scientist, would be approximately 4,200 meters. The number hung in the air, its implications clear to everyone present. 4,200 meters, nearly 3 miles, was far beyond what even the most advanced snipers currently considered possible for a first-round hit. It exceeded Alexandra's own record by more than 1,200 meters. "That's beyond the effective range of any current system," she stated matter-of-factly. "We thought you might say that," the ONR representative replied, opening another folder. "Which is why we've been developing this." The technical specifications described a revolutionary weapons system combining advanced ballistics, computerized fire control, and materials previously available only in laboratory settings. The platform designated XM203 represented the bleeding edge of precision shooting technology. It's still experimental, the DARPA man acknowledged. But initial testing suggests it's capable of consistent accuracy at distances up to 4,500 meters under ideal conditions. Alexandra studied the specifications carefully, her mind processing the implications. The system looks promising, but technology alone doesn't solve the fundamental challenges of extreme distance engagement. Environmental reading, calculation integration, psychological barriers, these remain regardless of the platform. Which is precisely why we need you, Captain Blackwood explained. The system provides the mechanical capability. Your methodologies provide the human element that makes it operational. For the next hour, they outlined the proposed operation in detail. The timeline was tight. Intelligence indicated the North Korean testing would commence within 3 months. The XM2030 prototype would be ready for field deployment in 6 weeks. That left precious little time for Alexandra to adapt her methodologies to the new system and prepare for what would be, by far, the most challenging shot ever attempted in combat conditions. "I'll need complete autonomy in training preparation," she said after considering their proposal. "And I'll need Master Chief Reeves as my spotter for the operation. No one else has the environmental reading capabilities required at this distance." The officials exchanged glances before nodding agreement. "Granted," the Naval Special Warfare representative confirmed. "You'll have whatever resources you require." The strategic implications of this operation cannot be overstated. As the meeting concluded, Captain Blackwood remained behind, waiting until the others had departed before speaking privately. "You don't have to do this, Alex. There's no shame in saying it's beyond current capabilities." Alexandra appreciated his concern but shook her head slightly. "It's not beyond capability, it's beyond conventional thinking. The difference matters. Even for you, this is pushing boundaries that might not be pushable. 4,200 meters through mountain terrain with variable winds and potential temperature inversions. The mathematical probabilities were equally prohibitive at 3,000 meters. She interrupted gently. "Until they weren't." Blackwood studied her for a moment, then nodded in resignation. "I've learned not to bet against you. When do you want to begin?" "Immediately. Have Master Chief Reeves meet me at the Advanced Ballistics Lab in 1 hour. And I'll need complete technical specifications for the XM2030, including all test data and design parameters." As Blackwood departed, Alexandra remained at the table, studying the satellite imagery with methodical precision. The challenge before her wasn't just technical, it was conceptual. Breaking through the 4,000-meter barrier would require rethinking fundamental assumptions about ballistic physics and human capability. Yet beneath her calm exterior, something else stirred, the familiar rush of confronting the impossible and recognizing it as merely the undiscovered possible. This was why she had joined the military, why she had persisted through barriers both institutional and physical. Not for recognition or advancement, but for moments exactly like this, when what seemed beyond human capability became the next frontier to conquer. Master Chief Reeves arrived precisely on schedule, his expression betraying both curiosity and concern. Once history's recording devices were switched off and security protocols established, Alexandra briefed him on the classified operation. 4,200 meters, he repeated, stunned. "That's beyond what we've established as reliable engagement distance," she finished for him. "Yes, but not beyond what's theoretically possible with the right system and methodology." Reeves processed this information with the careful consideration of an experienced operator. The XM2030 platform changes the mechanical equation, but the environmental reading at that distance. He shook his head. Variables compound exponentially. Wind alone would require reading patterns across nearly 3 miles of complex terrain. Which is why we're going to develop new methodologies, Alexandra explained, activating a holographic terrain map of the target area. Traditional approaches won't work. We need to create an entirely new framework for environmental analysis at these distances. For the next 6 weeks, Alexandra and Master Chief Reeves worked in near isolation, dividing their time between the Advanced Ballistics Laboratory and remote testing ranges, specifically configured to simulate the operations conditions. The XM203O prototype arrived 2 weeks into their preparation, a marvel of engineering that combined traditional rifle mechanics with cutting-edge materials and computational systems. The platform addresses several critical limitations, explained Dr. Eleanor Chun, the weapons lead designer, during their initial briefing. The barrel is constructed from a carbon nanotube composite that virtually eliminates harmonic distortion during firing. The proprietary ammunition uses a guided stabilization system that maintains optimal flight characteristics throughout the entire trajectory. Alexandra examined the system with professional appreciation but pragmatic skepticism. Impressive engineering, but technology alone doesn't guarantee accurate engagement at extreme distances. The human element remains the limiting factor. Which is why you're here, Dr. Chun acknowledged. Our engineers can design the perfect mechanical system, but without your methodologies for environmental reading and operator psychology, it remains merely theoretical. Their training regimen evolved into something beyond conventional military preparation. Alexandra integrated elements of advanced physics, meteorology, and even meditation techniques designed to enhance perception of subtle environmental cues. Master Chief Reeves adapted surprisingly well to these unorthodox approaches, his natural abilities amplified by the systematic breaking of psychological barriers. The fundamental mistake most shooters make at extreme distances, Alexandra explained during one training session, is thinking of the bullet's path as a simple arc affected by a few primary variables. The reality is more complex and dynamic. Interaction between the projectile and continuously changing atmospheric conditions throughout its flight path. She demonstrated using a sophisticated simulation that visualized air currents across complex terrain. At 4,200 meters, your bullet will travel through multiple distinct environmental zones. You need to visualize its entire journey, not just the beginning and endpoint. Reeves absorbed these lessons with the focused intensity that had made him her star pupil years earlier. It's like learning to see the invisible, he observed after a particularly challenging training exercise. Not just what's happening now, but what will happen during the bullet's entire flight time. By the 4th week, they had progressed to live-fire exercises at progressively increasing distances. The XM203O performed impressively, consistently placing rounds on target at distances that would have been considered impossible just months earlier. At 3,500 meters beyond Alexandra's previous record, their consistency reached 85%, an extraordinary achievement, but still short of the near certainty required for the operation. At 4,000 meters, accuracy dropped to 70%, remarkable by any standard, but inadequate for a mission with such critical strategic implications. We're hitting limitations that aren't platform-based, Alexandra noted during their performance analysis. The rifle and ammunition are performing beyond expectations. What's limiting us now is environmental reading at these extreme distances. The breakthrough came unexpectedly during week 5, when a severe storm front moved through the testing range, creating complex wind patterns similar to those they might encounter during the actual operation. Instead of postponing training, Alexandra recognized an opportunity. "This is perfect," she told Reeves as they set up their position despite the challenging conditions. "These are exactly the kind of complex environmental patterns we need to learn to read." For the next 8 hours, they observed how the storm systems moved across the landscape, creating visible effects that revealed previously undetectable air currents. Alexandra developed a new methodology for atmospheric mapping, visualizing the three-dimensional movement of air masses through indirect indicators across the entire bullet path. "It's not about reading the wind at your position or the target," she explained as they refined the technique. "It's about constructing a complete model of the atmosphere between them and projecting how it will evolve during the bullet's flight time." When testing resumed after the storm, the results were transformative. Their accuracy at 4,000 meters jumped to 90%. And even at the operation's actual distance of 4,200 meters, they achieved 82% consistency, approaching the threshold required for operational approval. Captain Blackwood visited during their final week of preparation, observing a live-fire exercise from a distance. Alexandra and Master Chief Reeves were engaging targets at 4,300 meters, deliberately exceeding the operation's requirements to build in a safety margin. "Remarkable," Blackwood commented as he reviewed their results. "When we started this program 3 years ago, 2,000 meters was considered exceptional. Now you're more than doubling that with consistency. How is this possible?" Alexandra packed her equipment with methodical precision before answering. "Human potential isn't defined by physical limitations, but by conceptual ones. We accept barriers because they're established in collective knowledge, not because they're truly insurmountable." The operation was scheduled for early April, selected for optimal seasonal weather conditions in the target region. 3 days before deployment, Alexandra conducted a final briefing with the mission planning team, reviewing every aspect of the insertion, engagement, and extraction. "Weather models predict ideal conditions," the meteorological specialist reported. "Clear visibility, minimal precipitation risk, and relatively stable air masses across the region." "Never trust models completely," Alexandra cautioned. "They're useful baselines, but actual conditions always present unexpected variables. That's why we've developed adaptive methodologies that can compensate for real-time changes." The night before deployment, she found herself standing alone on the darkened firing range, mentally reviewing the operation's countless variables. The weight of responsibility was substantial, not just for mission success, but for the strategic implications that extended far beyond a single shot. "Thought I might find you here," came Master Chief Reeves' voice from behind her. "Pre-mission ritual?" Alexandra nodded slightly. "Mental preparation. Visualizing every stage of the operation, identifying potential failure points, developing contingencies." Reeves moved to stand beside her, both of them looking out across the darkened range toward targets invisible in the night. "3 years ago, I wouldn't have believed this shot was possible," he said quietly. "Even after everything you taught me, there's a part of my mind that still says we're attempting the impossible." "That's the final barrier," Alexandra replied. "The lingering doubt that persists even when evidence contradicts it. Breaking through that is what separates theoretical capability from practical achievement." The insertion occurred with textbook precision, a hello jump from 30,000 feet that delivered Alexandra, Master Chief Reeves, and a small security team to their landing zone 18 miles from the target area, moving only at night and avoiding established paths. They reached their designated firing position 36 hours later, a rocky outcropping that provided both concealment and clear line of sight to the North Korean facility. Distance confirmed at 4,186 meters, Reeves announced after establishing their position and conducting precise measurements. Slight elevation advantage of 312 meters above target area. Alexandra methodically assembled the XM2030, each component checked and verified before integration into the complete system. The rifle represented the pinnacle of current technology, but it remained merely a tool, its effectiveness entirely dependent on the human intelligence directing it. For the next 6 hours, they observed the target area, documenting movement patterns, security protocols, and environmental conditions. The facility operated with predictable precision shifts changing at regular intervals, Personnel moving between buildings on established schedules. Primary target identified, Reeves reported as a middle-aged man in a lab coat emerged from the main research building. Dr. Sung-Ho Kim, project director. Consistent with intelligence photographs. Alexandra observed through her advanced spotting scope, noting the man's movements and behavioral patterns. He inspects the test equipment at 0930 hours daily, remaining in the open for approximately 8 to 12 minutes. That will be our optimal engagement window. As dawn approached on the second day, they began final preparations for the shot. Alexandra had slept in carefully timed increments throughout the night, maintaining optimal mental acuity while Reeves monitored the target area. Now they meticulously reviewed their calculations and environmental readings once more. Temperature 52 degrees Fahrenheit. Humidity 28%. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the mountain range, the operators completed their qualification. Each had demonstrated remarkable capabilities, consistently hitting targets at distances that would have been dismissed as fantastical just a few years earlier. Alexandra gathered them for a final briefing, her quiet authority drawing immediate attention from these elite warriors, who had already been exceptional before entering her program. "What you've accomplished here goes beyond marksmanship," she told them. "You've demonstrated the capacity to transcend established limitations, to see possibilities where others see barriers. That mindset extends far beyond shooting. It applies to every aspect of operations, planning, and problem-solving." She gestured toward the distant targets, now barely visible in the fading light. "The difference between ordinary and extraordinary isn't natural talent or specialized equipment. It's the willingness to question established boundaries and the discipline to systematically move beyond them." As the operators departed for their next assignments, carrying these revolutionary capabilities back to their respective units, Alexandra remained on the mountain, watching as darkness gradually enveloped the landscape. Her journey from outsider to revolutionary had transformed in not just military sniping but the very conception of what was possible in combat operations. The quiet woman who had once been dismissed and doubted had rewritten doctrine, established new operational parameters, and demonstrated that human potential extended far beyond conventional assumptions. More importantly, she had created a legacy that would continue expanding long after her direct involvement ended, methodology for transcending limitations that could be applied across countless domains. "What's next?" Reeves asked as they packed their equipment for the return to base. "We've already pushed well beyond what anyone thought possible. Where do we go from here?" Alexandra's gaze remained on the distant horizon, where targets invisible to the naked eye had been consistently engaged throughout the day. "The journey never ends," she replied quietly. "Every boundary we break reveals new ones waiting to be challenged. The question isn't where the limitations lie, it's whether we have the courage and vision to move beyond them." As night fell completely over the Nevada desert, the legend of Alexandra Morgan, the quiet revolutionary who had transformed military precision shooting, continued to grow with each shot that defied conventional wisdom. Her name would never appear in public records or media reports. But within the shadowed world of special operations, it had become synonymous with a powerful truth. The impossible is merely waiting for someone willing to question why it's considered so. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.